Part of what I wanted to do that was a little different than what most people do on movies like this is I wanted to try to do as much practical effects as I could. The difference between practical and digital is the practical effects are things that are done actually in real life on the set that you can see when you're shooting. Digital is something that's added later by a computer. If you have an explosion going off, if you do it practically, you put dynamite in the wall and the wall blows up. To practically do it is to really do it that way. To do it digitally, you would give it to an animator who would draw it on a computer. Most people use a little bit of practical elements, but mostly they'll do most things CG. We wanted to do practical because it's the way people used to do it, and I wanted this film to feel kind of nostalgic. It feels more real. When I watch a movie and I see stuff that's really been shot and not digital, digital stuff, if there's too much of it, starts to look like a video game to me. It removes me emotionally from those movies, and I wanted this movie to work first and foremost on a visceral, emotional level, very much like the early Amblin movies, Spielberg stuff like E.T. and Close Encounters, and think about Lucas's work in like Star Wars. And that era of the sci-fi movie is sort of what I really grew up loving, and that's something I wanted to explore with this film.
I read the script, and on paper it looked like it was going to be a big CGI nightmare.
Favreau!
One of my first conversations with John, he's like, I'm going to do minimal CGI. It's going to be models and miniatures, and the set's going to tilt, and all this cool stuff's going to happen.
The first explosion is going to be done just by jolting, no interactive light, maybe some debris falling from the ceiling. The second one is one of the missiles, like we did into the cabinet, going through screen behind him, hitting the fireplace that we could shoot at a later time if we want to blow up the fireplace.
I think when you're forced to do something in a real way, it gets a more real effect. There's a newfound reliance upon computer graphics, and it's kind of new, and it's pretty amazing what you can do. But we all felt that at the end of the day, there's something that you don't really connect with when you're seeing it because your brain registers that it's fake. The movements don't really seem real. And with two children, you don't want to take the chance of not getting a performance, of just saying, look scared.
Have all the real stuff happen instead of them adding it in digitally. All the explosions and the debris and everything, it's really cool.
Okay, let's bring up the vibration, please.
But whenever we could, instead of shaking the camera and telling the kids to react like the house is shaking, we built a house that shook, so that the kids are really scared they're going to fall off their feet.
And
They were able to create a 9-point earthquake on one of the sets.
I thought it's going to be basically like a ride at Disney World for 3 months, and they're going to pay me instead of me paying them, so that excited me.
And then he built an enormous gimbal that we built the 2-story house on.
People don't know what a gimbal is out there. It's basically your house is on the gimbal and you can do this to the whole house, invert it to 45 degrees, back, spin it around.
When you see the gimbal, except for its size, it looks like an erector set. The hydraulics allow it to, by computer control, allow it to move in all directions at any speed that you want.
all right, here we go. Ready, and gimbal.
So that when the gravity hit, instead of throwing CG books across the room and making it look like the kids were sliding down the floor towards the window, we actually tilted the house and made everything slide.
What did the card say?
All right, good. Ready, and action.
And I tell you, these Zorgons are hard on a house. In the example of the Zorgon harpoon, it would be difficult to do in the computer world because there's energy that's created by that harpoon. It would be very difficult for a person to sit down and try to predict all of those little pieces, those little elements that the harpoon would give you naturally.
And all that compressed air is going to go in here, and that's what's going to shoot it forward like a bullet in a gun.
The harpoons are amazing because they shoot through the house, and it's a really amazing thing because it comes in and it spreads apart and shoots back. And it is so awesome.
So when they're reacting to this thing, you see debris and a real harpoon shaking a real wall.
3, 2, 1.
With the schedule of shooting a feature film, sometimes to pull off a big practical effect on set, you really know that you're only going to have one chance. And John had exactly one try to get that right.
3, 2, 1.
It's a shocking thing to see half your set go flying away.
Do we have it all now?
Let's go do it again.
No, that's great. So, and also, I feel like you lit the match. I think the timing should be, hey, that's Dad's nap couch. You look up at him,
And purposely
light it, and do it.
I think my favorite sequence in Zathura is when the astronaut and the boys light Dad's sofa on fire.
You better get it out of the house!
We had to sell a burning sofa tumbling through outer space. And this is actually a good interaction with the practical effects team because we got 5 real sofas that were identical, and they were on a rotating motorized rig that John made.
They created this big, huge rig, metal rig that they could put it on like a big spit. And they could rotate it, they could program it for different speeds, so it would rotate at a consistent speed. And then we set up, about 40 feet of track and a camera, what we call the Genuflex, which is a motion control kind of dolly crane.
We moved the camera so that it would make it look like the sofa was moving, doing the moving instead of us. And we had a couple of practical effects guys with fans who blew the fire all around.
You don't really want to do flames and CG if you can avoid it because they always look phony. I mean, you see it in movies here and there, but generally it doesn't work. There's so many random dynamics happening that's very hard to duplicate.
Okay, and flame on, and wind on, wind on.
Obviously there wouldn't be fire in space, but in our movie there is, so we had to figure out what maybe that would look like.
What exactly am I supposed to get out of the way of exactly? I have no idea. All it says is take evasive.
One of the things we have to do is contrive elements that are interactive with the children so that they've got something to react to.
Meteors!
To shoot the meteor shower, special effects guys had pre-cut a bunch of holes in the floor and set little charges underneath them so that little bits of debris would blow up out of them.
They're called air mortars, and they have debris like cork and balsa wood in it, and it blasts up through the floor, and it looks like something's coming down and hitting the ground. So we had to make patterns and run around and everything exploding.
The task fell to us in post-production to add believable smoke trails, flaming tips of the meteor, and then also what we found is we wanted to add more meteors in than we had done practical charges for, so we had to paint in, we paint in holes, and then we had shot debris as an element with a splinter unit during the shooting, so we had to comp that into all the holes. That all added to the realism.
In the last couple of weeks we shot the black hole sequence, and that's really when the house gets torn to nothing.
I think we're home.
It's John's wall that gets ripped off practically. We pick it up in midair and it becomes a digital wall. We reveal a big swirling, fiery thing that's part John and part us. When the obliteration happens around the actors, that really is John's domain. Sometimes we would shoot the kids on green screen in the set, and then John would come in and work all night with his guys, and they would set up all the huge pulley systems. And John, your job is to make this 12-ton wall fly away as if it's one of our other CG pieces.
I left set and it was just with a bunch of holes in it. But then the next day I came back and half the wall was teared off. So that was pretty whoa.
We'll take it as far as we can, but obviously without Joe's help, what we're doing, it couldn't be done.
My power is pixels and his power is pulleys and mortars and all kinds of things. John is everything that's great about old school filmmaking, and he's everything that's great about new school filmmaking. There aren't too many people who have a foot in both the past and the present and bring what's best of the past into the present and then improve on it. John is, at heart, the kid who used to love blowing things up when he was 10.
Won't be a dry eye in the house.
He hasn't lost an ounce of that, and if he can blow something up, it's a good day. I think there's nothing that takes you out of a fantasy film faster than not believing what you're seeing. That if you can suspend disbelief in a fantasy film, there's really nothing like it. And one of the ways to ensure that is to do as many things practically as possible, because then there's less of a chance that the audience will be thrown out of the film by not believing what they're seeing.
Ready, and action!
Cut.
John's a man with a vision. My part of that is trying to spend enough time with John to try to imagine what he's got in his mind's eye. It's a difficult thing. I mean, it's not difficult to get the information out of him. What's difficult is giving him his dream.
Come on, John, get it off. And
You know, he's got a very specific imagination. He raises the bar. I'm not going to give him less than what exactly he had in mind. He's not going to accept anything less than what he had in his mind.
It's okay.
the odds were...
And Bill, yeah, thank you. Wow.
Zathura is a movie about two kids who get shot off into space in a house as a result of playing with this board game that they find in the basement. Now, these two kids don't get along very well. Their parents are divorced. They haven't really dealt with that yet. They're not getting along with each other. They're very competitive. The little brother's not getting enough from the older brother, and the older brother doesn't want the little guy around. And they're both very competitive for their dad's affection. Now, you put these two kids in this situation, and they have to learn to work together to fight all the things that come out of the game, like stranded astronauts, these out-of-control robots, lizard men, pirate guys, spaceships, asteroid showers, these big scary planets with strong gravity fields. And so the challenges that the game present are all within sort of the genre of science fiction and adventure. And it's how these kids overcome these obstacles and how they grow through the process of facing these things that is the real story behind the movie. I was involved in adapting the book to some extent. I had read a draft that was written by David Koepp and John Camps that took a book that was about 25 pages and took the imagery that's very strong that Chris Van Allsburg did a really nice job on through his artwork and his storytelling, and it expanded upon that and added an emotional dimension about these three kids that were growing up in a broken home. And that's sort of the core of the emotional aspect of the movie.
Well, the amazing thing about David Koepp was the basic story of the movie is very, very true to the book. But what he did, and he did it with such fidelity to the book, was he delved into the emotional relationships with the boys and also created these great action sequences that are suggested by the book, but because the book can only show a little bit of it, they're only suggestions, and he found these fantastically ingenious ways of both creating great action, great suspense, and also dramatizing the emotional story between these two boys, which is the center of it. And yet, he didn't add a lot of plot. You know, it's not like there's a whole complicated plot. The plot is very, very easy to understand, but he just found a way of kind of getting inside it and just making the most of every single moment.
It's just wonderful, you know, the way he expanded everything and took the themes in the book and the basic idea and just kind of, it became this wonderful adventure. So I think David, using the basis of kind of like real brothers, they feel very real, how they would behave and how they would come to grips with their kind of competitive natures and how they would eventually team up and work to bring themselves home. I think all that plays very real, which allows you to buy into the fantasy elements. And part of casting Tim was an effort to maintain that reality quotient where you feel like it's a real family struggling with real issues.
Sucks is what it does, but it's the best I could come up with. So climb off my back and give me a Just 2 inches of space, will you please?
You know, then you get into these very big action set pieces that David Koepp is very famous for. And what I liked about his draft is it preserved a lot of the imagery and the strong juxtapositioning of images, a house in space, Saturn right outside your door, a Zorgon pirate scurrying through a hole in the roof, a meteor smashing through the television set in the living room.
John worked with Dave to bring, I think, some more of the tone that John brings to things. He has a very real flavor. His sense of humor is always grounded in a very real place. And there was a decision to take the movie tonally to a very real place, whereas if these things are really happening to these boys, it needs to be scary. It needs to be very heartfelt in the right times. It needs to be funny.
What I sort of think that I excel at is relationships between people. That's sort of my roots in the smaller movies. And my background as a writer and as an actor helps me create a situation where the actors could do something that's true and real.
Dude, that's our food.
Yep. And you're running low on supplies.
And the more real the situations are, even in an extraordinary, set of circumstances like House in Space, if you can make it emotionally real and have the characters communicate in a real way, it grounds this crazy story in reality and allows the audience to really relate and experience the movie with the characters.
Things happening among the kids, sorting out what's going on while they are engaged in this game that takes them to different places, and they're learning that with us. And in order to believe that actually you can open a door and see Saturn and the rings there, you have to come from a place of reality. When you're building up that and having a very strong grip in reality, then you open the door and you feel with the kids what they can feel. And them as actors, they can have then the tools to relate and grow emotionally in their own characters as things progress.
But anytime when you have as much tension as is generated by a movie like this, where you have kids and monsters and everything's going haywire and everybody's scared and playing it real, there's great opportunities for laughs, and I try to take advantage of those opportunities.
I got it. Flunk Space Academy. Go back one space.
I'm not even gonna comment on that.
The fact that it starts off in a house and most of it takes place in the house is nice because you feel a connection to your environment. And of course what we needed to overcome was that you don't want to feel trapped in a house for the whole movie. And so we wanted to make the house as interesting as we could. We wanted to make, the cliche, you make the environment a character. We really wanted to make this house something spectacular so that when it comes apart over the course of the film, you really feel like it's it's a tragedy.
I don't think we should play that game anymore.
Mike Riva was really cool to collaborate with because he wants to know why you're doing something. He doesn't want to just know what you want. And then once you share with him what the goals are, he could then come up with other ideas.
After Tim Robbins leaves the film in the beginning to go off and doesn't come back to the end, we had to keep his presence alive in the movie. And rather than just put them in any old house, John and I decided early on that we wanted to depict a man who is recently divorced, who's trying to make an old house into a home.
I know it's not Mom's house, and I know it's a little creaky, but give it some time. It's going to grow on you.
So we picked a house, and we picked a design, and as it developed, John loved that craftsman thing. So we just went to town and made it all the things about a craftsman house that we liked, but big enough to suit our action.
The challenge was to make enough happen to the house over the course of the film that every time you hit the set, it was different. Every time you enter the living room, it's in a different state of disintegration. So it feels like you're going into new areas throughout the course of the film. It doesn't feel like you're in the same environment the whole time.
That was great.
We've been fortunate in being able to shoot pretty much in continuity, which means that you shoot in the order that the scenes actually happen in the film. So everything that happened speaks to the next scene.
That actually kept the entire crew and the director and everybody else in sync with the process of the movie, because the house goes through so many stages that we had to shoot it in that order.
Like you got a pretty serious organ problem.
Michael Riva, our production designer, and his crew brought an extraordinary level of detail and inventiveness to all the sets. The Zorgon spaceship, which has backed up into the basement, and there's this whole conveyor belt, and they're shoveling all the stuff from the house into this huge fire, and you just look at it and you just go, oh my God, and there's so much imagination and so much detail and so much inventiveness.
We wanted something that would contrast totally to what we were seeing for most of the picture. Most of the picture we've been inside this wooden house, and now we had an opportunity to break that envelope, even for a brief period, to give us a bit of a breather, and that turned out to be the spaceship.
Caught cheating, automatic ejection. A lot of the stunts are real. On the gimbal set, the Source 3, when the gravity starts to change, I come sliding all the way down, like 45 feet, down this long thing, and I stop because I hit the wall, and everything comes flying. It's really cool. It's really fun because I get to go in a harness. This set that we're on right now, it shakes. It's really cool.
We wanted kids who were game for that, who were going to be game for being in a house that tilted, for being in a house that shook. When that house shook, especially towards the end of the movie, that's like a 8.0 earthquake. I mean, it's scary in there. It seems like the whole thing's going to fall apart. And then we also had a lot of wire work for them. They were hanging from wires and, all the zero-G stuff. Most of that was done on the house, but then we also had certain things where they would be hanging or dropping down on cables, and we had to, make sure that they'd be comfortable with that.
I'm about to fly on a harness.
For both of our actors, Jonah and Josh, I had them in rehearsals months ago of getting them in harness. I had special harnesses made for them, and getting them on the wire and getting them used to it. We're so lucky that our actors are kids that are extremely athletic, very smart, and very coordinated. And I've been using them for 99% of the stunts. I use my son Reed, and Logan Brown is our other stunt double for our Danny character. I mostly use them for rehearsals, and once we have it down to exactly what it needs to be, then I make the determination if it's safe enough for them to do it. Whenever we were on the gimbal set, they walked and moved, but they were always connected to something, so they were safetied off. Josh had to walk up through the study and wedge himself into a doorway when it went to max tilt, and the robot starts grabbing at him. Robot gets a hold of his shoe and pulls him, and he slides all the way through the whole length of the house and crashes into the front door. With Jonah, he had a little more intricate business to do because he's hooked on wires on an overhead traveler track. He's starting to walk up through the living room. He grabs a hold of the bookcase. As he grabs a hold of the bookcase, the floor is tilting, and he starts flying up off the ground. So we had to coordinate the wires of him being pulled up off the ground and working his way up the bookcase to grab a hold of a light sconce. He grabs the light sconce, it breaks, the wire breaks, and now he flies all the way across the room on wires. It was quite a bit of business for him, but no problem. They never complained once and would laugh the whole time, so it was great.
They kind of make it hard on me even because I have the harness and all that, but then there's a string they put a string on the back of me, and Tom Harper, the head stunt guy, he was pulling on it, so it was really hard for me to get up to the lamp to hold on to. My favorite scene is when I get ejected, because the feeling of weightlessness, because I'm just sitting there and I go vroom, right through the roof. And it is amazing how fast I went up, and you felt your stomach just drop. That was so much fun. I had a hard time not laughing because I had such a good time doing it. And it was really cool is that you get ejected up, and then you're hanging upside down on this set, and you're just hanging there trying to reach up, and that was just so much fun, just getting to just hanging out.
But ultimately, we needed kids who were going to be comfortable, throwing their body at this movie. and trusting that they'd be okay. And these kids never got scared. And that's part of the reason we're able to be as ambitious as we were in the filmmaking. You know, I grew up watching like Star Wars and all of Spielberg's early stuff, and that's what going to the movies was to me. And I think there are different sizes of films to tell different types of stories. If you're dealing with this type of movie, you have a very big canvas to paint on. And this type of subject matter is appropriate to do a movie of this size. But a movie like this, it's like you have a whole other range of tools available to you. And the ability to build sets like this, the ability to do special effects, miniatures, robots, computer-generated images, all of that stuff is, it's a lot of fun for me. And having a little experience with that type of stuff, it's sort of the next logical step for me to keep it interesting, to grow as a filmmaker.
I also think when you have a great story and you have a great script, it becomes a magnet for everybody. It was a magnet for John. It was a magnet for the cast. It was a magnet for great production designer Michael Riva, great cinematographer Guillermo Navarro, our costume designer, all of our set decorators, all the people. Everyone was drawn to this because it's more than just a job. You go on an experience, and when you make a movie, you really are drawn to it not just because it's a paycheck. You're drawn to it because there's something special about it, the promise of a great emotional experience.
It's a big ride, and there's no slow spots. It's just one fun, the thing just catapults you through the adventures that the game presents, and it's really exciting to watch. It's exciting to work on. It's a fun movie.
So let's go again.
Okay, let's do it one more. Okay. When you have the opportunity to cast fresh talent, you have a wonderful opportunity to cast the best people that there are. I really didn't want to compromise in any way. I knew that movies live and die by the cast. You could have great effects and great sets, and if you don't have real emotional human beings that you enjoy watching and experience the film through, then you don't have an emotional connection.
Hey, Jonah.
Hello, Jonah.
Tim Robbins, who's a seasoned veteran actor that really brought a lot of heart and soul to the film, and it really creates a nice pedigree for these new actors to sort of fit into an ensemble with.
I read the script, and it reads really well. It's an adventure, but also as a journey for the family.
You have an incredible imagination. Amazing imagination. A whole universe of an imagination.
My favorite thing about it is that every single kid ever has at some point played inside their house, imagined inside their house, all kinds of different fantasies.
Can we please play Army Men?
But you're in your house, and you're in the safety of your house. In your imagination, you're going other places, but you're still in your house. Well, this movie, the idea that the house travels through space, I think taps into some real common kind of fantasy of that thing that happens sometimes when you're kids, when you're so bored and you're in your house and you just want to look out the window and see something different for a change. I think that's why I responded to this script, because there's something that's really universal about it. There's something that every kid has fantasized about.
It's a unique movie in the sense that there's only 5 cast members. And so we really we knew always that the 2 kids were going to carry this film, and we had started a search. And we worked with Avi Kaufman, who has found a lot of kids and has an extensive resume and a great reputation and this ability to find new talent.
The difficulty, of course, is that by the time you've seen a kid in one movie, they're years older by the time you're casting this one. So it's not like you could just look at film. You really have to find somebody who could help you judge the children and tell you who to look at and guide your attention in certain areas.
It was about 2 or 3 months. I'm sure I saw hundreds in New York and Chicago, LA, Minneapolis. I sort of put the search everywhere.
So she was very helpful, and Peter Billingsley, who's a producer on this movie, who I've worked with in the past, he himself was a child actor. He was Ralphie in Christmas Story, and he has an understanding of how to work with child actors too. And he helped me scrutinize between, who was just cute and funny and who really had the goods to to bring something special to the film.
It was interesting for me, having come from that world, to be on the other side as well. I think John was hoping I was going to bring a level of insight into it. And in a session in New York, Josh, who's from Kentucky, was there doing a film, and Jonah lives there. And it was just the sort of thing when they left the room where we just looked at each other and said, I think we're done. It was a gut reaction on both of the boys when we met them that they were the right ones.
Josh Hutcherson, he's like a young man. He's got this confidence, and it exuberates his confidence that you believe him. He's saying something that catches your eye. So you're going to take this journey with him, and you're going to feel a little safe. Even when the journey goes out of control, you kind of feel like Josh knows it's out of control, but it's his job to, keep it on path.
Walter! I told you I wouldn't let anything happen to you.
Hold the door for him, hold the door. Okay, but close it all.
And Jonah Bobo feels like a character. He feels like something's going to happen that's going to take you by surprise. He's got this kind of scratchy voice that you almost think he's going to tell you a joke.
Let's
go again!
They both have a lot of heart, and you care about both of them, and that's what you need to do on this Zathura journey.
When you say, what's that for?
I say my gerbil.
My gerbil is in there. When you entrust an entire film to the performances of young kids, you have to go with the top choices. You have to go with the best kids out there. And for my particular taste, these kids are the best. I don't like kids who are just really good at mimicking and memorizing and hitting their marks, and they're like little robots. I want kids who are bringing a reality to it emotionally, and who can improvise, and who could react in an honest way to a set of circumstances, and do comedy too.
No, that wasn't you.
And I needed kids who weren't just going to hit their marks and scream when the monster came. I wanted kids who could expand upon what was written and find the truth in it. And these kids are just beyond their years. I mean, they were head and shoulders above everybody else I had seen. And it was a real struggle to be able to accommodate two out-of-town actors, because there are plenty of kids in the world, but these were the two I needed to have.
Going back to you, buddy. Now push away. See, they don't even...
Their families were great. They had the commitment to the job. Their acting was tremendous. And they felt like brothers. There was something about them when they were in the room together, the way they naturally played off each other, that there was a dynamic, that Jonah liked Josh, and that Josh seemed a little bit older than him. And there was just a little magic that happened with them.
No. You could do it. That's a 10.
I can't do that.
What could you do?
The kids carry the movie. They get a lot of help from Dax and Tim Robbins, but it really relies on the abilities of Jonah Bobo and Josh Hutcherson. Josh is an incredibly gifted and experienced actor for his age. He really understands the mechanics of being a film actor. And I remember auditioning the kids, and he walked in after seeing a bunch of other kids his age, and it was like test driving a Ferrari after driving around a bunch of Volkswagens. He just took direction so well. You could speak to him like an adult. I would give direction in the auditions, starting at the level of a child, and then see how sophisticated I could get with it. I found myself talking to him like I would talk to any other actor.
Don't do that.
You want to play catch?
We just played catch.
No, football catch.
I have to work for an hour.
But it's Saturday.
Tell me about it.
All you ever do is work. You're stupid. This game is stupid. Our whole stupid family is stupid. And I'm sick of it and I hate it.
Jonah has developed a lot over the course of the film technically. And of course emotionally, he brings a very strong, innate emotional reality to his performance. And it's very, very compelling to watch him.
You are a very special kid.
That's what people say when they can't think of anything.
There's a certain honesty in performance that they both nailed, and the scenes make me laugh very much when they're especially when they're going at it with each other.
You playing catch with Walter? You might if you weren't around. You are so mean. Everybody wants to ruin my life. Keep your promises. All you care about is Walter.
Great. Beautiful. Yeah, really.
I've lost 4 teeth over the movie, but in the beginning of the movie I had a full mouth of teeth, so I have these. A flipper. It's a fake tooth because the movie takes place in one day. It takes place for these 2 teeth, and then this. Yeah, and it goes for this one and this one.
Give me those back.
Harry, frame up, Harry.
Give me them back.
They're mine, Grandpa. Mine, Grandpa. No, Grandpa, they're mine.
If you don't enjoy watching these two boys, as cool as the robots and the Zorgons are and the ships are and the house is, you don't really have a movie. So we've been extremely blessed and lucky with these guys and how talented, and they've just been so good.
Where's Lisa?
Lisa is upstairs.
When she came in on this, all of us immediately responded to, she's so sharp, she has so much intensity, she's so vivid. And we thought, boy, the comedy that's going to come out of the collision of this vivid, intense, really great girl with her brothers and with the aliens and with this mysterious astronaut really seemed like it was going to be a great thing for comedy. And she's been fantastic.
You guys actually set the house on fire! Well, I read the script, which was clever and funny and extremely adventurous, which was kind of different from anything that I'd ever done before. And I really liked the idea of doing a comedy. It's just something new, something I've never tried, and I'm a big fan of Jon Favreau, the director, and so that was definitely a draw.
And Kristen Stewart was not anything like what I had originally envisioned in reading the script or what the studio had envisioned in that role. But she was just so luminous and so talented as an actor and so wonderful, and you just couldn't take your eyes off of her. You know, I knew that she had to play the sister.
I just feel so safe around him.
With the character of the astronaut, you want somebody who's going to make people laugh.
I passed through a time sphincter to get here. You realize how difficult that is?
What's a time sphincter?
A wormhole. About yay big.
And he also has to be this guy that comes in and saves the day. And in casting Dax, we really were able to get a guy who could be funny and who could be real and could be vulnerable and emotional and could be powerful and strong. And somebody that I think you want to spend time with and hang out with.
Do you think it's funnier if I'm like this or if I'm like this?
I don't know.
Like casually.
Let's do one of each.
I was scared. I do comedy. I'm okay with that. I feel comfortable doing that. But being a hero or being heroic or looking at the camera and going, this way, you know, follow me. I'm not good at that, or I didn't think I would be good at that. And John really kind of put me at ease and said, you know, a hero doesn't have to be, you know, Tom Cruise conquering the world. So I do believe that Tom Cruise conquering the world is the definition of a hero, but luckily John was lenient in his interpretation of the word hero.
Oh man, Dax is awesome. Me and him are always making jokes between shots, or we're telling these really weird high-pitched stories to each other. This one time I went to Canada and I got attacked by some raccoons. Yeah, it cut me up pretty good. I got some rabies and cut off my tibia and my fibula, but it was overall a pretty good trip.
You know, we're supposed to shoot this scene a week ago. This is the turkey from a week ago.
Hope you like salmonella.
He does these high-pitched stories, like he tells about the story where he was drunk on the plane and he made out with an alligator.
The kids are the funnest part of making this movie, because generally I'm the guy on the crew that's annoying everyone by singing and being loud and telling jokes, and these kids are just a little bit louder than me and a little more excitable, so I seem very reserved in comparison. I seem like a hard worker. So to me, it makes me shine. I couldn't look as good as I do without those kids. That's what made it so fun to come to work every day, is those two.
Ready?
Oh, this is a scary one. Watch this.
Really?
Back is way scary.
Forward now.
I can do Dax, I can do Dax. Go. What's your problem?
We decided to use the miniatures, partially because I'm just a fan of that as a movie geek. You know, I always liked reading about that stuff. I was a fan of it. I'm getting to play with the toys that they use in the movies I grew up watching, which was fun. And so when we set out to do Zathura, especially because it's sort of an old science fiction stuff coming out of an old science fiction game, We said even if we didn't do it and it didn't look great, it would still look bad in a really cool way.
I also like the look of miniatures. I think good CG is great CG, and CG can be very convincing, but CG looks different than miniatures. And there's a different reaction, I think, to miniatures on screen as there is a reaction to miniatures in person. When you walk into the stage and there's a 6-foot house with damage on it, everybody runs up to look. It's like big, great toys.
It's an interesting moment in time where people still, the skills set is still there. People still know how to do it, but they're not called upon to do it that much.
When they brought this project to us, it was kind of exciting because it was just a ton of miniatures. I was just happy to see a director that was willing to go this way and wanted to go this way.
I was scared when I first saw the models because you go there and they did, I mean, the house is beautiful. You know, if it were a dollhouse, it would blow your mind, you know. The thing was the size of a small car. It was enormous. But when you look at it in the fluorescent light as they're building it, you get scared because there's no turning back. We even had in the budget the ability to replace the house with a CG house in case it didn't work. But we were going to try.
The construction of that miniature house, the 6-foot house, was as identical as we could get to the construction of the real house. So those materials, the lath and plaster and the bricks and all of that, had to be scaled down. And it's a tricky thing, and that's where the talent of the model builders comes in.
It was a lot of work. I mean, and those guys really came through, but it took the last week before we started shooting was a lot of detail work on the dirt especially, and the little the bushes or shrubs that outlined in the vine work. I think they ended up using thyme as for vines, you know, the herb, which worked really well.
The challenge in creating the miniatures and making them seamlessly cut with the location house in Glendale, which is a great old craftsman, and the set, is that each of those entities, I guess, each of those versions of the house serve their own specific purpose. Everything kind of cued off of the real house, but the set needed to be bigger to accommodate the crew and the lighting and all the equipment and all the things that had to happen in those rooms. And then the miniature had to kind of work in between. It had to look enough like the house that we see for real at the beginning and the end of the movie, but it also needed to accommodate the changes that we needed to make in the set.
Zorgons.
Gerbil was in there.
This is bad.
Something that's kind of interesting about the house is you know, you think about building a miniature house, you don't really think about how important the detail inside the house is. But the way we thought of the house floating through space is if you walk down your neighborhood at night and you really can't see the house that well, but you see all the windows and you see what's inside. So what became apparent instantly when we started shooting and looking at the dailies is how much detail and how much we had to match exactly the set. So we spent probably, I don't know, a couple of extra weeks really bringing up the detail inside the house so that if you cut from the boys in the set to the exterior, seeing the same set, it doesn't bump. You believe that it's exactly the same room. The miniature house had to be built to be destroyed so that we could chop into it, and it was built the same way as a real house so that when we tore pieces out, it revealed construction in the right way.
If a Zorgon blast has hit it, it's not enough just to cut it away and chop it off. It could just look like a hacksaw went through there. You know, you have to get the fine work, the splintering, burned edges. So every blast hole you see, every chunk ripped out, every wall, we really had to cut the house apart, paint it to look burned, rip it out so you had, you know, all the studs and joists and debris that would really be left over was really left over just in a miniature form and 5.5 feet by 6 feet.
The one thing that I really like about the Zathurian spaceship is it's very Art Deco to me. I mean, it's really wonderful. It's like a throwback to the old Flash Gordon days.
And that was a look that I thought would be cool because we were really throwing all the science fiction history into a blender and trying to deconstruct it. And Mike Riva and Phil Saunders had done some drawings of the Zorgon ships.
The spaceship was spectacular, and we wanted something that would contrast totally to what we were seeing for most of the picture. Most of the picture we've been inside this wooden house, and now we had an opportunity to break that envelope, even for a brief period, to give us a bit of a breather. So we designed everything that the house wasn't. It's no wood, it's all metal. It looks like the inside. I have this toy up in my office, this cheap little toy, and one day I took it apart while I was having coffee, and there were all these metal tabs and bad Taiwanese metal inside. And so I said, you know, this is what it should look like.
We built 4 ships total. We built 1 pyro ship that we're going to destroy. We built 1 ship that's just half of the ship that has operating ports that open on the side, and the cannons from the ship come out. They're all motion control. We have another ship that is going to be used for a crash sequence, and then we have our hero ship. It is plumbed with flames that shoot out about 3 feet.
One of the things that the director really wanted was to have a practical flame for the engine exhaust. And so for us, we have a flame that's probably about 4 foot long. So there's a certain precaution that we have to deal with as far as, safety and all of that. But it's really kind of interesting to be doing a shot and all of a sudden we light the engine off, and it definitely gets your attention.
We could have decided with the Zorgon ship to build a model and then create a CG flame, or to do it some other way. We took a little chance. Because we've all seen, I think, the old Buck Rogers ships, where the flame kind of tips up like a little lighter on its side and the smoke goes up, or there's little sparklers that fall out of the back of the ship. There's all these things that are laughable now, but we thought we could go with real fire coming out of the back of the ship and make it look as big as it needed to. So we did a lot of tests with different propane torches and a lot of very flammable stuff under high pressure. And we came up with a couple of things that on film look just great.
We have to really make sure that we sell the idea that this spaceship really does operate in space, and even though we're taking a little creative license about having a nice American family with their house dug up and thrown into space, that there still has to be some sort of creative believability. I guess you could really say that the 2 miniatures that we have built and we are now shooting are kind of like the stars of the show in a way. These are the 2 stars, so we have to really treat them as such.
Miniatures are a driving force behind this movie. I mean, I'd say a good portion of the movie takes place in space. We're going to have CG star fields and CG backgrounds, and CG is necessary in this movie to put the movie together. But, I don't think you're ever going to get rid of models. I don't think you're ever obviously never going to get rid of CG, but they both work together really well if done right.
It's great.
And then you're still pulling out.
It's great.
It's just performance. John, really fought very hard for us to have the models and miniatures in his show. And there is I think, a wonderful tactile feeling, a visceral feeling that you get from having a 3-dimensional, real, live model sitting in front of you.
There's a lot of people that don't want to use miniatures anymore because I don't think it's any more expensive than doing CG, but in the CG world you tend to be able to have a little bit more control over it. And in the model world, I think you get a better look, and I think that's what John's going for. I don't think you could ever match the look of this house in space in the CG world compared to how the model looks.
It was a wonderful marriage of the old technology and the new technology that created a very visceral feel for me. It gave it a real signature look and style that you're not going to see in science fiction movies. And it still does not emotionally take you out of the movie. You're scared because it seems real. So it really walked that tightrope that I didn't know, I was not confident we would be able to walk.
It's hard for me to say when I thought of myself as an artist, when I discovered that that was the thing that I wanted to do more than anything else. I basically went to college and thought I would study art for fun, that I didn't decide that I would become an art major because that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I just wanted to do it right then. My studying art in college was a result of a whim that captured me. And then I got to the University of Michigan. So I very quickly, found myself in the company of kids who really knew what they were doing. And when I looked around and saw how well they could draw, because they developed the skill of drawing, I thought, well, I can't do that. Because I didn't appreciate that it was actually something that you could acquire or learn. I believed that it was a gift, an innate thing. And so I thought, I better find something I can do. And because I'd been such a good model builder as a child, I sort of gravitated towards sculpture and making things with my hands. And so I did sculptures of things falling over, things crashing, ocean liners sinking in water. I'm not sure exactly why that held my attention. I like the idea of being able to freeze time. But the pieces that I made do suggest that something was going on. These all suggest that there's a little narrative involved. There's something before and after. When I graduated from Rhode Island School of Design, my habit as a young artist was to work all the time. So I said I need to find something else to do at night, a hobby. And I thought, well, I've got a drawing table in my apartment, and I have pencils and I have paper. Maybe I'll just start drawing some pictures. And they were a little bit like the sculpture that I made. They presented peculiar things. There was something happening in the drawing that suggested a story, that there was a provocation in the pictures. People would look at it and say, well, what's going on there? And I liked that. I decided I would draw some more pictures, just do that during the daytime a little bit. A friend of mine who was involved in publishing saw these pictures, and he said, why don't you show it to my publisher? And I was not interested in doing that, but my wife, always a tireless advocate for me, said, well, I'll take these to the publisher. So she took a stack of drawings and went to some publishers, and they all had a very positive response because they saw in them, I guess, this kind of storytelling impulse on the part of the artist. So I started working on a story, and at the time I was interested in topiary gardens as drawing subject matter. And I started thinking about an adventure in a garden. And then I thought about a boy who has an adventure with a dog in a garden, because I was kind of interested in drawing dogs too. And so these elements started to come together. And then I thought, well, such a strange garden would be overseen by a strange person. And I wondered how the person who had the garden would feel about the dog in his garden. And so it just sort of coalesced kind of into a story called The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi. And I discovered that I had presented a premise, an idea. And the idea was that there are two kinds of magic that people confront in their lives. One is the stage magic, the magic of illusion that you see when you sit in a theater and watch somebody cut a woman in half. But the other is the real magic, the magic of miracles, the things that you can't account for. It's a little bit like, the Polar Express, which was an idea about taking a trip on a train, but became a story about something much more than that, a story about belief and the ability to recapture the specific kinds of belief you had as a child, a belief in the miraculous. The Mysteries of Harris Burdick, which is the collections of the drawings that I discovered of Burdick's and collected into the Mysteries of Harris Burdick, has an image of a house lifting off as if it's rocket propelled. And what's happened is kids see the Burdick book and they're inspired to write stories based on these images, which is a lot of sort of the way I make some of my stories. And when I was working on Zathura, I realized that with a slight story manipulation, I actually could have made it a Burdick story, The House on Maple Street. When I draw pictures of places, I make them up because I have in my imagination, in the case of Zathura, this particular place. And you're trying to make something that looks absolutely real, but because it doesn't exist and you're just relying on your imagination, you end up making something that looks real but isn't. And it's a little bit more like a dream. And it's not really my intention to make it look spooky and menacing. I'm just trying to make it look right. As a visual artist, I've always been interested in what I think of as cognitive dissonance. And that's when you have two things close together that don't belong together. And you can't make sense of them. I like the idea of putting things together that are unexpected. And there's nothing odd about a picture of a kitchen, and there's nothing particularly strange about a picture of a couple of monkeys. But if you stick a couple of monkeys on the kitchen table, then you've got something that's more than the sum of its parts. So I like the idea of having this house quiet, still, and then I thought, well, there's children in it. They actually don't like the quiet and stillness and predictability of it because it's boring to them. And so I thought, well, what's the remedy for boredom? Well, the remedy for boredom is a game. I thought, well, they'll play this game, and this game will produce things that will make the house very strange indeed. I thought, I'm going to make a game that delivers everything it promises. You know, when it says there's a monsoon, there's going to be a monsoon, and it became Jumanji. The boys who play Zathura are introduced on the last page of Jumanji. They're introduced as Danny and Walter Budwing, and all we learn about them is that they don't finish what they begin. And that's a real sort of enticement for kids who read the book to wonder what happens to Danny and Walter, because they know not finishing Jumanji is bad news. I didn't write that last page, you know, thinking that I would ever revisit Danny and Walter. And sometimes kids would send me Jumanji 2 stories and that sort of thing. And so as years passed, I became interested in what did happen to Danny and Walter Budwing.
Can we watch SpongeBob?
No.
You used to like it.
Times change.
Tartar sauce. I'm hungry.
So what do you want me to do about it?
Make me macaroni and cheese.
I don't know how.
I believe in being sort of, following the rules that you create for yourself. And I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that this exactly fits the last page of Jumanji. I guess I sort of felt challenged by it, to see if I could come up with something like a sequel. I knew I could not do an interesting story simply by taking the game and putting it in Danny and Walter's hands. I wanted a new game. I had an old catalog published in like 1904 or 1905 as a reproduction of the Sears Roebuck catalog. And it had board games, which were quite popular then, board games in it. And I remember seeing that board games often had a game printed on both sides of the board, or sometimes two boards, and that would be an economy because you could use all the same gizmos. You could use a spinner or dice or little markers, tokens, and so you get two games for not much more than the price of one game. So I was thinking, well, I've got Danny and Walter Budwing. I could make a completely new game just by shoving another board in there, and that's the game they would play. It conforms to something that artists often do, and that's variations on a theme. And if you look at painters, I mean, Monet, he painted some haystacks, and then he painted some haystacks again. They have augmented it quite successfully, I think, because they've added things to it, but everything they've added is consistent with the things that only exist as suggestions or the small kind of like plot points that are in the book. But the character story that's in there, which is the thing that really is, I think, most successfully sort of augmented, is this conflict between the brothers.
Look what he did.
I was on the phone.
It was an accident. You're such a baby. I'm not a baby. You break all my stuff.
When you see a fantasy that has so many impossible things happening, when you see a real human relationship intertwined with that story, it makes everything seem more gripping, more real. And so that little thing in the book, and it's only little because the book is so little, because it's still fairly important in the book, but that was sort of a seed that was planted that grew into the more complicated, tree that's the feature-length film script, and so. And then in terms of visually, I knew that when I was writing Zathura that there's this claustrophobia that takes place, because as soon as they start playing the game, the house is the world, because they can't go out. Every time I staged a scene and I had a window, I just loved picking up my ink bottle and just putting this pitch black in there with the little white stars, because that just was like this is it. You can't go out here. And of course that translates very effectively to a cinematic idea. But the one that they got closest to matching is really one of the really most kind of satisfying scenes is when Danny goes up and opens the door. But there's something about not being able to see what's out there, and then the character opens the door and takes a look out, and then you get to see it too, and it's it's real satisfying. Since this is the third book of mine that's been turned into a film, I've come to sort of think of it in a slightly different way than I thought about it the first time, which was that, books function as a kind of blueprint, and that the filmmaker is like a contractor and I'm the architect. And it's nothing like that at all, because principally the books that I make don't have enough information in them to actually be a blueprint for anything. It's that I've provided inspiration to another storyteller. I can take credit for the germ of the idea, the seed of the idea. David Koepp and Jon Favreau see what I've done, and they're inspired by it. And they add their own artistic impulses, their own feelings, their own ideas about it, and it becomes something different. It's still got some of my DNA in it, but it's got theirs too. So I understand that when you give these things over, that you have to give them over without attaching a lot of strings. You have to have faith in the artistic instincts of the next person, of the screenwriter and ultimately the filmmaker. You have to let them go. So when I got to that point and realized now that what film credits should say, they should never say based on the book by. They should say inspired by the book. Because even with novels, I think that's a more accurate way of describing what's happening between the printed page and the filmmaker. It's inspiration. I'm happy to provide it.
Back up.
Alien life form must destroy.
Walter, I think he's talking about you.
I've always been the guy who, even since I was little, I loved movies, that had a lot of effects, and I always was interested in movie making. So it's a way to learn about it as you're doing it, and you get to work with the best people in the industry. You're sort of an apprentice in a sense when you're a director, because although you're guiding the people who are doing these things, you're learning from them as well.
I'm one of the lucky people in this business. I've had a chance to work with some of the most creative directors in the world. And I have now worked with one of the most creative directors I've ever worked with, Jon Favreau, who has this wonderful take on films and effects, which completely parallels what I'm always looking for, and wants to actually work against the concept of the technology.
All the interiors, the monsters and the robots are all sort of built by Stan Winston, and they go back decades, and they have a fine tradition in real practical effects that are there on the set.
He wants things to be there and be live and be able to act and interact with actors.
We read the script. I thought the script was really fantastic, and a lot of our decisions as at Stan Winston's studio are based on how much we like a script, because you have to invest a lot of your time and energy into that. So I thought the script was very, very funny, and so did Stan. And the Zorgons were described as these green, scaly space pirates, which is a great concept. And once we got on board with Jon Favreau and Michael Riva and all the producers, Peter Billingsley and Bill Teitler, the influence of the film has a very 60s kind of retro feel to it. So the design has a bit of a retro feel to it. And so that's how we interpreted those characters.
You are visited by Zorgons. What What's a Zorgon?
First and foremost, it was a mandate by the director, Jon Favreau, in our early meetings that he likes the look of physical effects, knowing that there is an absolute place for digital effects as well. But when you can create as much as you can in front of camera for the other actors to react to, it has more of an immediate sense of the creature actually being there. Over the years, we've kind of developed a certain system where there are certain showrunners that will take a script, interpret the script, work with designs, and then work with the director, production designer, all departments, in bringing whatever's written on the page to life. So it goes through a process of design concept, and then physical art construction, and then all the molding processes, mechanical processes, rehearsal processes, and then we finally bring it to set and shoot the scenes as if they're actors in the film. A very interesting concept was Jon Favreau's, in which you can utilize a physical suit and have the actor's head outside the suit and then digitally remove the head. So the mandate from the design was we have a man's body, but where a suit performer's head would naturally be, or where an audience can kind of detect where the man is inside the suit, we would remove that right down to the shoulders, which creates a silhouette that makes you wonder where the head is. So then the neck comes out of the chest, which elongates the whole creature. And it's sort of a headless horseman magic trick. But because we have the technology to digitally remove things and replace it with background, that was just a brilliant idea. So that was very much the centerpiece of the whole design. They're actually quite complicated suits, and it's not just for the suit performers wearing them, but for the people outside operating the head, the neck, the eyes, the nostrils, the bladders that move, the tail that moves. So there's a lot of coordination. So really, when you see one Zorgon, there's probably actually 4 minds working together. The guy wearing the suit and then 3 additional people that you don't see, making it look the correct way, responding, giving it that kind of life.
We did a lot of tests also with the skins and how they react to the light, because again, those were characters that had to be sort of progressively being revealed. In the beginning, you have a hint of what they are, but you don't really see them. So lighting them was all about having just edges that the light will kick in and then it will go away, and depending on how their moves were. And then finding the right speed to shoot them with how they're moving. So we would do a little higher speed when they would move, and this is this guy carrying and doing the moves. So there were a lot of elements and a lot of people working around this creature to make it come to life.
I think the reasons that we made the choice to have actors in Zorgon suits on set and actors in partial robot suits is that we were working with kids. And as brilliant and as smart and as talented as these 2 kids are, I think it would be a lot to ask them to look at a ball on a stick and say, oh my God, this is a lizard man that's chasing you. The pluses to having real suits there when you're working with young actors is that the actors have got something to absolutely interact with. It's a real threatening presence, it's there. It's a great big green lizard man with a sword. There's all sorts of interaction of the set. The physicality of it you really feel and sense.
They're really real looking, so it's really scary, because you really have good motivation when you see a Zorgon running at you with a sword in its hand, because it's big, it's slimy, and it's coming towards you fast. It's really cool. Your robot is defective.
What does that mean?
It means my robot's broken.
We don't even have a robot.
I think one of the most popular elements in Zathura is the robot. And we thought, even in pre-production, when we had a drawing of the robot, we thought, oh, the audience is going to love this, the kids are going to love it. He starts off as a 10-inch toy and grows pretty quickly into an 8-foot, giant, heavy iron, we don't know how he works, but he does, robot, that he has one very simple task. He's kind of like a giant 3-year-old who's told to chase you and catch you. And he has a little trouble with his own weight. and his own proportions, because his arms are a little too long, his chest is enormous, his waist is tiny, his legs are short.
The robot was a huge challenge because it was a combination of Mike Riva design, Stan Winston creation of a guy basically in the robot suit. So you had the robot's torso, the robot's head, and the performer was wearing the robot's feet. So we would add the arms and we would add the legs. So what we needed to get out of the performer in the robot, though, was, you know, a believable performance, which is a little difficult to judge. Honestly, when you see a guy in a robot suit running around in dailies, you think, oh my God, this isn't going to work. So we did a test in pre-production, and we had actually Stan Winston's digital company add legs and arms to it. And you know what? It was amazing, but it worked, and it was funny, and John loved it.
We like the fact that a performer wearing a part of this suit is out of balance, and he's struggling to keep his balance, and that's a hard thing for an animator to kind of capture. So we had the performer just run through the set, kind of slamming into things, trying to stop, really fighting against what he was wearing, even though they did a great job. We shot that with cameras that would repeat, motion control cameras, and then we also shot the rooms with nobody in them, so that we could paint away the performer wherever you see him, and then Sony Pictures Imageworks filled in the rest of the robot in CGI.
You got so many subtle things. There's one shot where the robot runs into the desk, Dad's desk. He's chasing Walter, and he slips on debris that's on the floor. Well, the reason we got that is because that really happened. The guy was in the suit. He was supposed to run into the desk, but the stuff falls on the floor, and he really was slipping on it in the robot feet. So there's subtleties to that performance that would anyone have thought of it? And then B, if they did think of it, how well could you have executed the subtleties of how weight and mass, you know, act? So that was challenging, but it worked out really well.
We had a lot of versions of the robot. We had a full body robot that could be puppeteered. We had a BAM-bot, which was made of iron and all heavily welded, and we would smash that through doors, and we'd smash it through walls. And we had a less refined version of the suit that was lightweight and good for running around and just chasing the kids. And we had a more detailed version that had a lot more gadgetry inside, so that the eyes would function and the antennas would function, and there's a little window into his mechanics. It's not electronics, by the way. It's all mechanics and oil and steam and fire and that sort of thing. And BabyBot was the 10-inch tall robot, and he has sort of more childlike features than the 8-foot. And he was puppeteered from beneath the floor. The Stan Winston guys would just kind of cram into any crevice that they could get into, and we'd drill some holes, or they would drill the holes and poke the rods through, and just kind of by feeling they would puppeteer the little 10-inch BabyBot.
When we build creatures, we generally like to perform them as well, because we know them, we know how they work, or at least we have the mental idea of how we think they should work. And the Zorgons and the robot are pretty physical in terms of the way we're manipulating things. So we've got internal mechanisms, which are to say cable or radio-controlled systems within the confines of the faces or bodies, but we also use rod puppeting, which is a process in which you have an external rod connected to a limb or a head, and you can actually physically move it through space, and the rod is visible. And much like the Zorgon's heads being replaced, the rod will then eventually be taken away as well. And that allows for a great amount of responsive ad-lib kind of movement. That's what's really fantastic about it. Also, it's kind of a nice organic flow, because it's a direct correlation from your mind to your hand to the item that you're moving.
Cars. Shipmate enters cryonic sleep chamber for 5 turns. What the heck does that mean?
We said, let's do something where Lisa's frozen through the movie. That was something that came up later. That wasn't in the original script. That was something that came up through development. And so what we came up with was that, you know, she gets frozen, and by getting frozen, she's still there, but she's not really aware of what's going on. She becomes a prop. And then later in the movie, she comes back to life and unfreezes and is part of the movie. So I figured for Lisa, we'd get a mannequin, and we'd spray her with that, and there would be this white frozen prop that we would throw around and have fun with. Well, you can't sell that to Stan Winston Studios. Next thing you know, they were taking pictures of her and scanning her.
The wonderful thing about Frozen Lisa is that's a work of art using every method of replicating a human being that we've been using for years.
We start out with a body scan, and they scan roughly, because you're wearing clothes, they don't need to get it exact, but they scan for your body type, and then you go in and you get molded. First they did my head, and they did my legs, they did my arms, and then after all the molding I had to come back a couple weeks later, and they had to paint me. I stood next to me, and they painted me.
The finesse of it is the artists, the sculptors, who end up taking these forms that have been cast from the actor and laser scans of the actor, and subtly doing a final sculpt to make sure that the eyes are right, because you don't cast somebody with their eyes open. Having the reference of photos and having reference of the laser scanning, she is literally just a really beautiful mannequin that, because the artists have a good eye and can see when it looks right and when it looks real, knew how to paint her, knew how to give the depth, and you could see that it was real. And then using flakes and wax and all the typical Frozen things that we would do to an actor and that we've been doing for years, but in this case, covered onto a replica of the actress that is perfect.
I have to say, it's a trip seeing yourself in person, because you can see yourself on screen, which is also kind of weird, but to see yourself actually in person, standing next to you, it's just a sensation that no one really has ever experienced before. And also the fact that she's blue and icy and frozen, and every nuance, every freckle, every line on my face, it's there. It's amazing. They did a great job.
Well, I got there, and you couldn't tell. You're looking to see if it's breathing, and it looked just like her. And they had gone through a process of making it look frozen without making it look dead. I mean, that was the other thing, is you didn't want it to be like a horror movie. So you wanted it to be haunting and have life in its eyes, but also, be obvious that it's frozen and not awake.
Checking playback on that. It's a cut. Checking out playback.
When you've made creatures for 20 years or so, or in Stan's case, 30 years, you're constantly challenged to wow an audience, because there have been not just our studio, but a lot of other studios that are making creatures and interesting things as well. So you're always striving to come up with a design that's both functional and pleasing just overall, or interesting enough to go, wow, that's actually really, really neat or iconic. And that's always going to be a challenge.
Stan and his guys, with their ingenuity and the combination of, it's scary, it's whimsical, there's tremendous personality. And because they're real things that the kids are really interacting with on a real set, you always feel that they feel that they're real because they are real.
Any great actor will tell you that 50% of acting is reacting. The best actors will tell you that their best performances come from acting with another good actor. Imagine doing your best performance with no actor there. So these are tools. We're creating the performance for these characters, but they're also tools for our actors. And it brings a reality to this movie. And so now I'm going, now here's what we've got now, and this is why I'm excited. Got a terrific script, got an amazingly imaginative director, we've got great actors, and we have been able to create characters in a way that nobody's seen before. It's kind of a slam dunk, isn't it?
Look what I found in the basement.
Looks dumb and old. I like it.
I had this vision for the game to be not a board game with dice that are rolled, but instead to be this really cool vintage wind-up tin toy, sort of like a post-war Japanese pressed tin mass-produced game. I was always captivated by the stuff of my father's generation. My dad was a baby boomer. He grew up, during World War II and after World War II when all of that was that technology was sort of new, and it was always interesting to me. So even though I didn't grow up with it, I was always a bit obsessed with all of that vintage stuff. You know, it almost has a spirit to it. So we wanted to put a lot of character in the game. We wanted it to be something that would be very intriguing to a young kid like Danny as he found it. But first and foremost, the game itself had to be interesting and exciting to look at when he winds it up and the piece moves around. And so I think, you know, we did a really nice job in designing something that, although it's new and goes beyond whatever really did exist, yet feels very familiar to the period.
The game is a game of dice in the book, and there's none of the qualities of this thing. We took a big leap in that area, but right from the day one we did. I think that was John's desire not to have the rolling of the dice game at all, and then we started talking about the metal game with the key and all of that stuff. But we kept the game slightly nostalgic, but we also kept it mysterious to a certain degree. Right up to the very end when it spits out the last card and tells you, oh, the game's over and you're still in space.
Game over. Thank you for playing.
That's it?
Now what?
There is an edginess to the game. There is a mystery to the game that we wanted to maintain. The other thing is the board had to be, there had all these parameters. The kids had to be able to carry the board and walk around with it through the whole movie, and we couldn't give them something that was too big that they couldn't carry. The design of the game was really trying to go from point A to point B, and what would it look like in between. And John was very specific about maybe having it go up one way and come down and then cross back over, and I thought it should have a little bridge that goes up and around, and then at the end of it, since it is a black hole, we thought it should kind of spiral around the black hole. So all these things started happening and coming together, and the thing that John and I were obsessed with were some of the specific pieces of it. The little spaceships and having enough, you know, following each other around. The rolled sides of the game, which I mentioned earlier, were really, really important. And then one day a guy walked into my office who's a wonderful illustrator, concept illustrator, named Phil Saunders.
The key thing that conceptual drawing really had to achieve was to present something that everyone could really look at and go, yes, this is what we're talking about. This is the kind of thing that's going to express that 50s philosophy. The other thing was the graphics. We spent a lot of time looking through old books on Buck Rogers comic strips or Flash Gordon, and those were a real inspiration for the kind of drawing that they would have had, the simplicity of their spaceship designs and also the simplicity of the line work, and even down to the way that the colors in the lithograph would be offset and a little bit out of register. And it really gave that feeling of, wow, this is something authentic. This is something that's been in somebody's basement for 40 years. In the context of the movie, the game itself becomes another character. It really becomes the antagonist in the story. And so it really had to have a personality. It had to have things that moved and maybe gave a sense of foreboding at some points in the story, gave a sense of excitement that this was something that held a lot of possibility as you started playing this game. So the challenge was really to create something that seemed very, very real, something that seemed very familiar to people, but also something that was a little bit magical. First, we had to work on developing the path that the spaceships would take, figuring out how many steps would be played in each moment in the script. So once we developed the layout and we'd gone through and figured out how many spaces there would be, we started working on conceptual sketches for what it would physically look like.
Danny, take your turn. There's no key! Find it!
Well, the key was another interesting challenge because in the script they're talking about rolling dice. And in the end, I think, everyone hooked onto the idea of a skate key because it was something that could physically be handed over from one character to another, sort of the passing of this is your turn. So we spent a while working on a number of designs for that. I think I did a large page with
probably a dozen or more different designs based on a lot of the typical keys that we had found in reference of old games. And I think we ended up going with the one that almost everybody preferred, which was a very traditional looking key. Very simple, cheaply made, but that still had some of that magic to it that you get from something authentically old. The challenge with making a prop like that work for camera is that you have to think of it not just as a product, but also as a piece of a set, really. I mean, you're going to have a camera in there very close. You have to tell a story with this game as well. And this really becomes the marker of progress throughout the film. You follow those spaceships and where they are along this path as an indicator of how close these characters are to their goal. So it was very important, particularly in the storyline about Danny and his brother being somewhat competitive, Danny never getting to win. It was very important for us to always have a clear view of where those ships were in relation to each other, who was winning at any given point, because that became a very emotional issue throughout the story.
Danny, you won.
I won?
You won?
You won, Danny. You beat the game.
So I started from those ideas and ended up doing one sort of key perspective sketch of the game as a whole that I thought fitted that philosophy or that aesthetic of the 1950s stamp tin toy, and showed it to Michael, showed it to John, and it was an instant hit.
Months before this film ever went into production, Michael Riva and Jon Favreau and Phil Saunders sort of designed and came up with the concept and the idea behind the game, at which point they handed off to me and say, okay, make this happen now. So it was my responsibility to figure out how to make the ships move and how to make the card pop out, how to make the spinner spin. So I sort of have to take the blueprint and make it a physical being, so to speak, in this case. I can't stress enough how much I feel like this game is a character in this film, and I treated it like that. So my responsibility was to figure out how to mechanically make this work and put it out there so that it could be a practical prop. Basically, there's 5 elements to the game. You turn the key, which then pops the button. You push the button, which then spins the number, and then that tells the cars how many spaces to move, and then the card pops out. So we had to connect all those elements together, and unfortunately it can't just be a robotic machine all in one, so I have to be off camera pushing little cue buttons to make all those elements happen. So I cue the button to pop, and as soon as the actor touches the button, I cue the spinner to spin. And once the spinner stops spinning, I cue the cars to move, and then when they land, I cue the card to come out, and the actor is able to take the card out, read the card, and whatever that card says affects the entire house. There was one issue that the 2 ships had to automatically move without a person touching them. So there's tons of little stepper motors inside there connected to computer chips, and I program it off camera with a little box that will tell the ship land on space 14 or red car 14 and blue car 12. There's also there's a card that pops out of the game. What we used is an ATM motor. So when you stick your ATM card in the ATM machine, we took that motor and feed our cards out of the games.
In order to win the game, you have to get to the end, which is Zathura. So then this planet comes up off the game and it starts spinning, and spinning really, really fast, and then it opens up, and then the black hole appears. It's really cool.
The ball game, when it starts to spin and rise and open, at some point becomes computer graphics. So the mechanical parts, which were my responsibility, were to spin the ball, shoot out the sparks, make the ball rise, and open the ball. In order to accomplish all that, we had to build a 5-foot platform and put 3 guys underneath a table that ran, the machinery. There's hydraulics involved to make it raise. There's motors involved to make it spin. There's grinders under there to make it spark. And so it's an incredible rig underneath a table with 3 human beings under there to make that all happen while we're filming. The game box was just important to Jon Favreau and Michael Riva, as was the game. So Michael Riva spent hours and hours on the set aging this game, just every fine detail of every corner of the box, and we all just sort of worked together and said, hey, let's try charcoal here, and let's try wax here, and there's a raised portion of the game right here in this box, so it might be worn down a little more there, or here, so we sort of all teamed together with Michael Riva at the helm with rags and rubbing and sandpaper, and it was really an actual fun process that we went through to accomplish making the game box looking the way it did. The first time that I came to the set and presented the game to the boys, Josh and Jonah, their immediate reaction was to grab that game and run with it. Thankfully, I handed them the dummy game and they were allowed to. So they had no idea really what they were in for. And they had no idea what this game was about to do. And so I then brought in the mechanical game, and I explained to them how sensitive it was and how incredibly, careful we have to be with the game, which is kind of, put them in sort of like this, weird space. So I lay the game down, and I start putting it through its mechanics, and the two boys were in awe. They were just sort of like looking down at the game like, how is this happening? So they were very excited, and then from there, the immediate reaction from Jonah was, I gotta touch this. So you immediately reach out to grab the ship that's moving all by itself. And of course, that gave us all a heart attack. Jon Favreau, Michael Riva, everybody just went, whoa, 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 don't touch the game. And so it was sort of this weird space with the game in that the boys had to learn how to respect the game as if it was another actor. So respect, space, we had to sort of practice all those elements of life with the boys, and they finally, you sort of get to understand it. And soon after, Jonah came sneaking up to me and he said, can I please run the game? And so I handed him the remote box and I taught him how to run the game. In fact, Jonah is probably the only other person in the world that knows how to run this game right now.
The job of being a filmmaker is to take something very familiar and expand upon it in a way and go places where reality cannot. But to have the jumping off point as a familiar feeling that people have in discovering something in a thrift shop or discovering something in your dad's trunk in the attic is a fun place to start to take people on a crazy adventure like Zathura.